Keeping them honest with a part of Ron Paul's past that you might not know about. And truth be told, it's a part of his past that we don't know fully about. That's because the congressman who's now leading the polls in Iowa gets kind of prickly whenever he's asked about this. And because, as we just learned tonight, his story appears to have changed over the years as well. Now that's him today taking off his microphone, cutting short the questioning from CNN's Gloria Borger. The questions have to do with racially inflammatory writings published in monthly newsletters bearing his name, and these were to paid subscribers during the 80s and 90s. Now, though the articles rarely carried a byline, they were written in the first person and ran in publications such as Ron Paul's Freedom Report, the Ron Paul Political Report, and the Ron Paul Survival Report. Now, this all flared up about 3 years ago when the liberal New Republic did the story. More recently, though, the same reporter writing for the conservative Weekly Standard fleshed out even more details, as have news organizations from the New York Times to CNN. What we've all uncovered are items like this from a 1992 newsletter shortly after the LA riots titled Special Issue on Racial Terrorism. Listen to this. One line reads, "Order was only restored in Los Angeles when it came time for the blacks to pick up their welfare checks." Well, in fact, order was restored when the National Guard moved in. 2 years earlier, in another Ron Paul publication, an article criticized President Reagan for signing legislation approving the creation of the federal Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, complaining, quote, "We can thank him for our annual Hate Whitey Day." Again, these newsletters were written in the 80s and 90s while Ron Paul was out of Congress and had several thousand subscribers. And as I mentioned, a lot of this first came to light in 2008. In fact, Wolf Blitzer asked him about it back then.
Congressman, there's a lot of material there, but let me just try to figure out, how did this stuff get in these Ron Paul newsletters? Who wrote it?
Well, I have no idea. Have you ever heard of a publisher of a magazine not knowing every single thing? The editor is responsible for the daily activities, and people came and go, and there were some people that were hired. I don't know any of their names. I do not, absolutely honestly, do not know who wrote those things.
Did you used to read these newsletters, Congressman?
Not back then. There might have been at times I would, at times, but, you know, I was in a medical practice. I traveled a lot. I was doing speeches around the country. So very frequently, you know, I never did see these. Matter of fact, some of the things you just read, I wouldn't have recognized them.
Now, again, that was in 2008, but keeping them honest, in 1996, when he was running for Congress, Democrats dug up other passages from his newsletters that he did not deny writing. One called late Texas Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, who was African-American, quote, "a half-educated victimologist." And talking about crime in Washington, quote, "Given the inefficiencies of what D.C. laughingly calls the criminal justice system, I think we can safely assume that 95% of black males in that city are semi-criminal or entirely criminal." Nor did he deny writing this statement: "If you have ever been robbed by a black teenage male, you know how unbelievably fleet of foot they can be." Now, he was asked about that and the other two statements as well by the Dallas Morning News. The reporter, Catalina Camia, writing, quote, "Dr. Paul denied suggestions that he was a racist and said he was not evoking stereotypes when he wrote the columns. He said they should be read and quoted in their entirety to avoid misrepresentation." Again, though, at that time, he did not deny writing the passages. 5 years later, though, talking to the Texas Monthly, Paul backed away from all of that. He changed his tune. Quote, "They were never my words," he said, "but I had some moral responsibility for them." He said this campaign aides told him, quote, "Your name was on that letter, and therefore you have to live with it." So that's 10 years ago. He seems to be saying he didn't write the articles, but his staff made him take responsibility. Fast forward 10 years later, he's now blaming the media for bringing it up again. But as you'll see, he's not doing so much to clear the air. In fact, today, Chief Political Analyst Gloria Borger spoke with the candidate.
And let me ask you, I mean, you've been answering a lot of questions lately about the newsletters that were published under your name, and some of the things contained in them were conspiracy theories. Some of them are considered racist, and you've disavowed them completely. But they were called the Ron Paul Report. And did you read them at all when they were published during those years? Did you ever sort of take a look at it and say, you know what, this isn't what I stand for?
Not all the time.
But you did read them?
Not all the time.
Well,
on occasion, yes.
And did you ever object when you read them?
Well, you know, we talked about this twice yesterday at CNN. Why don't you go back and look at what I said yesterday on CNN and what I've said for 20-some years. It's 22 years ago. I didn't write them. I disavow them. That's it.
But you made money off of them.
I was still practicing medicine. That was probably why I wasn't a very good publisher, because I had to make a living.
But would you give it back? If you made money off
To
of them and
whom?
you disavow, well, charity, if you made money
That's
off of
nonsense.
them and you disavow it.
I didn't write them, and I don't endorse those views, and I've explained it many times.
So you read them, but you didn't do anything about it at the time.
I never read that stuff. I've never read it. I was probably aware of it 10 years after it was written. And it's been going on 20 years that people have pestered me about this, and CNN does it every single time. So
Well,
when are
it's
you
a
going to wear
legitimate-
yourself
I mean,
out?
when you say it's no, but
When are you gonna do that?
Is it legitimate? I mean, is it a legitimate question to ask that something
You know,
went out
and then when
under
you get
your
the
name?
and when you get the answer, it's legitimate that you sort of take the answers I give. You know what? The answer is, I didn't write them, I didn't read them at the time, and I disavow them. That is the answer.
Well, it's just a question. I mean, it's legitimate. It's legitimate. These things are pretty incendiary. You know,
Because of people like you.
No. Come on. Some of the stuff was very incendiary, and saying that in 1993 the Israelis were responsible for the bombing of the World Trade Center, that kind of stuff. So,
Goodbye.
all right. Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate your answer. I appreciate your answering the questions, and you understand it's our job to ask. So.
Thank you.